up and sit down.
Hi guys, this is Bigmeks Workshop and Paint Studio. I'm Dodge. This is a conversion corner video, and today we're going to be mucking around making green stuff scales. There'll be a bit of experimentation in this video. I'll show you how I got to this result through the process of just faffing around with green stuff and different things, because hopefully you'll be able to learn something from this video as I have done. The very first thing I did was just stick a bit of green stuff down and do what most people do to start scales. Just get a tool and draw some scales in. This can work, although it does have its own problems. Keeping them all the same size is a bit of a pain, so I don't really recommend doing it this way. And I'm obviously going to speed up a lot of this footage because I want to keep this short, because you obviously want to see how to get to the end result. So I'm just using a wax sculpting tool for candle sculpting. You can use any tool you want really, and I just decided to go straight in and try and draw some scale shapes. This can work if you've got the patience, but I found immediately that this was very difficult to get the shape and the size right for every single scale, and also it was extremely tedious, hence the experimentation bit of this video. I'm just showing you what not to do, but hopefully you will come up with some ideas of your own as well. Maybe you can do things a bit better. So the idea there would be to sculpt in the shape and then use another tool to go around the underneath and squash those down so that the top scales overlap the scales on the underneath. And then all you'd have to do is draw in your underneath scales. So I decided to try and find a shortcut and found a bit of piping. I used the end of a pipette, cut the top half of the circle off, and just started using that to indent the shape of the scales, which at this point I'm thinking to myself, this kind of works. All you have to do is a row and then do a second row slightly to the side at the top, and again you can go in with your sculpting tool, push down each of those inner sections where the scales join, and trying to bring out that shape, and that kind of worked. So I followed this idea along a little bit more. So I decided that I was going to get a bit of plastic card, attach a bunch of little circle parts or shapes to it, so I can do a whole heap of rows at one time. As you can see, I've drawn a line on that plastic card there. Going to bond all those there. It's quite bendy as well, so I can use it to go around curves. And after a bit of super glue and a bit of time, I had something that resembled a row of scales. I'm going to cut that at an angle at the top, and hopefully, well, I was hoping at this point I would be able to do vast amounts of scales at once really quickly. Here's the test side by side, and what I noticed is the ones I did individually, they went together better. And the reason for that is when doing them bulked together, you can't overlap the thickness of the scale. Like where one begins and one ends, it's twice the thickness of the other ones on the other side that we did individually. So you could make a tool that does this. You absolutely could, but it would take a lot of precision and time. So I would only bother making that if you were going to spend a lot of time and doing a lot of scales. As you can see, it just doesn't work out as well. They're slightly too separated. You'd have to file them down before gluing them together so they match properly. And here we are, just testing it out, and yeah, the tool wasn't built right, and it was very difficult to get these scales to go at the right angle, especially on a piece like this of curved armor plating. Don't worry about the mixed up yellow bit on there. I knew I was going to take this off anyway. You will see a lot of that in these previous bits before we finally figure out how to make scales properly. But I felt at this point we were getting closer to having something that resembled scales. So after mucking around with the round scales, I decided to look around the studio and found these little bits of plastic card. And they are square bits of plastic card, rectangles if you want to be precise, whatever. So I did the exact same thing with this, and the result is immediately better. It just looks more scale-like. Also, it being made of plasticard is much more sturdy and doesn't move like the other piece that I was using. So immediately started thinking this might work better. I would put those little notches in, and that is where I'll put the next row. Just line up the diamond shape, I guess, and pop those in there. And one of the reasons for doing this is all your scales are going to be pretty much the same size before you even start working on them. Then, as you can see, I would indent those in, and at this point I know I'm onto something. So I kept working with this idea. Again, it's still going to be a bit time consuming, but already we have something that looks a lot more like scales and is a lot more precise. This is very close to how I ended up doing it. Inevitably, all those shapes there were just made using the bit of plasticard, and that gives us a nice start because it's very easy to line up, and it's closer to the original scale shape I was trying to go for when I was just hand sculpting it. As you can see, that's all that is a little bit of plasticard. I do recommend cutting the top part off. There is a reason for that, which I will get to in a minute. Because all we have to do now is pick up these bottom bits. But because we're using a plasticard piece, what we can do, is what I'll show you now, is I'm not just pushing this in now. I'm pushing it in and then pulling it up and pulling it back ever so slightly. And because green stuff usually sticks ever so slightly, it's already going to bring up the bottom of those scales. And that's going to help you out a lot. It's going to save you mucking about a lot. So I'm pushing in and then pulling up as I pull it out. It's lifting those bottom bits of the scale up, so when we start pushing the other bits around, it's going to start shaping itself automatically with very little effort in the way of at least this section. So you can see how quick you can get through making the scales there. Obviously they're not finished yet, but we're definitely onto something at this point in the video. So what I did learn over time was then to switch to my, it's a silicone flat tool. And all you've really got to do, if you use this tool, two birds, one stone here. As you can see, I'm going back and forth there. All I'm doing is pushing, see those middle row of scales? I'm pushing that top bit of the scale down and digging the underneath of my tool into the one above it to lift that up. And it's basically doing two jobs at once here. Because it's a silicone tool, it pushes back a little bit, so you're not as, so it's not as rough on it. You can take your time, and it's a little bit more forgiving than using a metal tool. But at this point here, I think I've almost cracked it. Obviously, I'm trying a bit too much there to reshape it, and we're starting to get that shape where it looks like it's layered up. So what we're going to do now is do a big piece on this cling film, and the reason we're going to do it on the cling film is because it's easier to do it on the cling film and then wrap it around the item that you want to do it on, rather than do it on the item a lot of the time, because the shape of the item, especially this one being cylindrical, it's really difficult to keep these straight. As you can see, this was me mucking about testing it again. You can see how pronounced you can make those just by doing that one simple move. I do hope this bit doesn't come out as jumpy as it is on my editor at the moment. And with it being on the cling film, we can now wrap that around anything we want, and it'll also pull those scales open even further. And I keep buying cheap green stuff. I mix it and mix it and mix it, and when I'm flattening this out to work on, it's not till you start sculpting that the little bits of yellow plastic or whatever it is start showing through. I need to start buying green stuff in two different compounds rather than in one long sheet. Again, this is another example. So this, I'm trying to get the best footage we can here just to show you how it's done. So we're going to push the top of that scale down and deliberately use the very edge of the tool I'm using to poke the other one upwards, which is a single movement and can be done on its own. And we're just going to keep rinsing and repeating that. It is tedious and time consuming, but it's really quick doing it this way, because you're killing the two birds with one stone rather than having to go back and forth as much. And as you can see, all the scales are the same size, same shape, and there you go. I mean, that's pretty easy. And you can see how shaped you can make them. It is nice to put a little twist on your tool to bring up those lower corners of the scales, but it does give the dynamic look of the scales at the top being higher up than the ones at the bottom. I really am just trying to put extra footage in here so you can see what's going on here. That brush goes in, so the tool goes in, and I'm lifting up the bottom one, but because I'm lifting up the bottom one, the tool is also brushing against the one underneath it and flattening it out at an angle to make it more three-dimensional. I do hope on this video you can actually see what it is I'm doing on here, and this bit of footage comes out okay. It's very hard to get it on the camera with the lights glaring off of the board that I made. Doing this whole sheet here that I've got did take about 2 to 3 hours. So one of the problems you're going to find is big areas. It's going to start setting more than you want it to. As you can see, they're nicely pronounced, nice and sharp, and I was actually quite happy with these results. Let's try to get an angle so you can see how raised up they actually are. And this video is actually all thanks to our patron Tom, who commissioned us to do an Alpha Legion night. And as you can see there, I've just slapped that on with a cling film, pulled it tight, and then all I'll need to do at this point is cut file and stick it exactly where I want it and do those outer edges. Wasn't quite big enough. If I'd made it any bigger, I don't think I would have had time to sculpt it all properly, but I can easily do the same thing again and then interlock them using green stuff. So, after a bunch of mucking about for a few days with green stuff, I think we have some really, really nice looking scales for this model. And I hope by the end of this video, you really learnt something and it really helped you guys out, because I'm quite chuffed with this. So I'm hoping anyone looking for scales can now look at this and go, yes, now I know how to do it, now I could do Alpha Legion or anything else that involves dragons, scales, or even fantasy stuff. So before you leave this video, I would like to give a big thank you to our patrons, the Orc Boys, Matt, Ludwig Hofbauer, D-Wack, Mark, Dave, Tom, and Spiky Dude, and Warren. Warren's back. Welcome back to Patreon, Warren. I do hope you enjoyed this video. You want to join them on Patreon, get early access to our videos and a bunch of other perks, links in the description. Want to help support the channel and get cheap models and hobby supplies? Click the Element Games affiliate link in the description for 15 to 25% off. Use the promo code BIG223 on checkout to earn crystals, as crystals equal cash in your Element Games account that can be spent on your next purchase, so everybody wins. And that's all from us. I shall see you in the next one.